Hello and good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's First 1,001 Days Movement Lunchtime webinar. It's lovely to see so many familiar names joining the list as we're entering in this morning. Whilst people are introducing, I thought I'd introduce myself. So my name's Ben Curran. I'm a campaign manager at the Parent Infant Foundation, and through that role, organizer of the First 1,001 Days Movement. So our movement is a campaigning alliance of 200 charities and individuals that are campaigning to raise awareness and to drive change for babies and their families from conception to age 2. We run these webinars to give our members a platform to share their expertise and best practice with the wider membership, so that ultimately we can learn together and get to know each other a little better. As people are still joining, I thought I'd just let you know about what we've been up to at the First 1,001 Days Movement. So this autumn, we've spent an awful lot of time at the various political party conferences, engaging with MPs and policy advisors from the various political parties, as we're working on a manifesto for babies, which we hope to be launching in the new year. We'll be promoting this manifesto, as well as our other webinars, through the mailing list. So if you aren't already on our mailing list, you can sign up for that on our website, which is parentinfantfoundation.org.uk/1001-days. I'll put the link in the chat so you can pick that up there. So today's webinar is going to be brilliant. We've got two fantastic speakers. We've got Georgina Marks, who's going to be talking about the Building Babies' Brains approach that they're using in Devon. And we've got Alexandra Hendry. We'll talk about the START program that she's working on at Oxford University to support toddlers who are suspected to be autistic or who have a family connection to either autism or ADHD, to help develop strong attention regulation and thinking skills. So they'll both speak for 20 minutes, and then we'll move on to a question and answer session. And you can submit your questions at any time using the Q&A function through Zoom. So don't feel you need to wait until everyone's finished to get your questions in. You can do that at any point when the question pops into your mind. Right, you're not here to hear from me. So without further ado, I will pass over to the first of our excellent speakers, which is Georgina Marks.
Hello, Ben. That was a lovely introduction. Thank you so much. It's lovely to be on this call with everybody else. As Ben said, I work for Devon. I work for Devon Children's Centres for Action for Children. And Ben is very kindly going to share my slides for me today, so I can tell you a little bit about our Building Babies' Brains approach, what it is, how it works, and why we're doing it. Thank you so much, Ben. If you're able to move us on to the next slide, that would be wonderful. Thank you. The place I'm going to start this afternoon is I'm just going to introduce you to a few of the 220 plus community champions that we've trained. So this is a celebration event we heard earlier this year. So on the picture there, you can see Rosie. She runs a CIC in South Devon, and they do a lot of groups for parents with babies and toddlers. You have Jo with us as well. Jo now works for us. She did our training back probably nearly 4 years ago. Jo sets up and leads toddler groups in her area. Beside her with a little one, you have Kath. Kath did some research with us. She's a fellow at Exeter University, so I'll show you a little bit of that research later. And then finally, just one other person is Amber, who joined us on the second course we ever ran as a breastfeeding peer supporter. I could introduce you to everybody, but there's not time for it. So next slide. Thank you ever so much, Ben. So I think most of you on this call will know that the science around what builds babies' brains is well established, but it isn't as widely out there as it could be. And we all want to be in that place where there is a common language and shared understanding. I think there's so much information out there, it can be confusing for parents, carers, grandparents, all of us whose work and life is out there and working alongside parents with the youngest children. So our aim alongside many of you here today and many others out there, is to increase that awareness of babies and toddlers' social and emotional development. Taking this idea that it takes a village to raise a child, we want to be part of a movement that is fostering that sense of shared responsibility, that idea of it being all of our business. And I guess one of the things that's perhaps a little bit different about our approach is our work is with both members of the paid workforce and unpaid workforce, volunteers, community members. We use lots of different terms for them, don't they, whether they're foster carers, toddler group leads, breastfeeding peer supporters. But what is different about our approach is our pass it on approach, and this idea of encouraging, supporting people to share the evidence base that is out there. Ben, could you take us on to the next slide, please? So we've been rolling out this approach in Devon for over 4 years now, and I'll tell you about some of the other areas that we're working on as well, including family hubs and other local authorities. I'll tell you a little bit about that later. When we first began, we were very much an approach aimed at volunteers, whoever they might be in their local community that comes into contact with parents. And then during the lockdown and pandemics, Devon County Council commissioned us to roll the approach out to workforce. So those people working in early years, settings, nurseries and the like, and the health teams and the things. So those people working and still seeing parents with babies and toddlers during those lockdown periods. So we have this approach that now brings together workforce and volunteers and increases their networks. Next slide, please, Ben. So I want to tell you just a tiny bit about Pass It On, or I'd like my colleague Anna, who couldn't be here today, to tell you about Pass It On. So this is just about 1.5 minutes, this video of Anna telling you all about what Pass It On means for us and our community champions.
But it's a lovely idea in that I pass something on to Georgie, and Georgie might pass it on to another person who might pass it on to another person, and it might pass on. So you get this tree of people passing information out. And it comes through those conversations that people having or passing on Facebook messages, doesn't it? Every day.
Yeah, and it builds that kind of common understanding.
Absolutely.
We really like the idea of random acts of kindness, didn't we?
And that partly ties into the idea that actually Pass It On is a kind thing to do. We're not doing this as a judgmental way. It's meant to be coming from alongside somebody. So it's the kindness, so that kind, that act of kindness fits really nicely, doesn't it, with the idea behind Pass It On?
Yeah, definitely. And they see it make a difference.
And they also find it makes a difference to them. So that's the really powerful thing. It's this big circle that you share a piece of information that you see lands, but actually it lands back with you and you feel that, do you know what, I've made a difference. And we talk about patting yourself on the back at that moment, but it's that idea that by passing it on, you're supporting somebody else to gain a message, but also actually you're really giving yourself something as well, aren't you? So I wonder why, I'm wondering the approach, how do we think about people passing the message on? We've talked about empathy, haven't we? We've talked about it coming from that place of being kindness, and we've talked about, I suppose it's that idea that it becomes your way of being, becomes part of what you do, and you gain confidence the more you try it out, you give it a go, passing bits on.
No, great, thank you, Ben. So I'm going to come on and talk a bit about Pass It On later, and particularly diffusions of innovation theory, which is where it comes from. All of the content of our course is evidence-based. You'll hear Anna talking about kindness there, so we draw on some of the research by the University of Sussex. Ben, next slide, please. So we share, along with messages from other campaigns, some key messages about what builds babies' brains. And those campaigns you'll be aware of, such as Shaping Us, research produced by others, including the NSPCC and their brain story work. And we localize those messages and that content within the course. So very much taking the national work and bringing it into small geographical communities and bringing people together to hear those messages. And the communities we've tended to focus on are those communities where, for a variety of reasons, there might be an identified higher level of need. We want to be part of that approach that's out there that aims to create a critical mass that leads to a tipping point. We were talking about it, weren't we, before we came on online, Ben, about that everybody singing from the same hymn sheet, really. So we want this idea of toddler social and baby social and emotional development to be all our business. In this information that maybe is slightly held in the hands of the few at the moment, although increasingly no, but it can become known by all, and especially those whose daily life brings them into contact with parents and families, whether they're a toddler group lead, a community pharmacist, somebody who works at the food bank, school gate conversations, that kind of idea. Next slide, please, Ben. So our course lasts for 7 weeks, and we weave together some of the themes that we've already heard about so far. And we add in things like the difference between positive, tolerable, and toxic stress, and impactful ways of sharing this information using the very accessible, engaging, and readily available content that's already out there, rather than perhaps recreating the wheel, stuff we want everybody to know about. And that's all evidence-based material. So during the 7 weeks, we talk about those kind of 0 to 2, 0 to 5 years when the brain is really growing, and that positive experiences that help shape resilience and all our well-being. We do lots of work around building confidence to share this information. We talk about parental resilience and our own self-resilience, that idea that you can't pour from an empty cup. So next slide, please, Ben. So I've mentioned some of our attendees who join us. It is very much a mixed group of people within a geographical community. So it includes foster carers, often those foster carers who have parent-baby placements with them. We've had library staffs, a paediatrician, many more. It's very much dependent on the community that it's based within. The workshops run for 7 sessions, and we take a blended approach. So 3 of those sessions are face-to-face all together in the same room. 2 of the sessions are live on Teams, so all together on Teams, and 2 of the sessions are via our learning platform. We hear from attendees that blended approach works really well for them. I'll tell you just the tiniest bit about our learning platform later. And it lasts for 13 hours across the whole programme. And we've got a train the trainer course as well that follows on from it. Next slide, please, Ben. Thank you. So I mentioned that we've trained over 220 people so far. So our starting place, our home is Devon, and we've trained all across Devon. We've also run the course in Bath, Plymouth, Torquay and Cardiff. So we're spreading out there to different projects. A couple have been family hub projects. The one in Wales is a programme that supports young people with their mental health, and they really wanted to bring in those youngest years. We've had feedback from all of our attendees, and we get a strong sense that the approach works from them, and we get an idea of who they're sharing it with, how they're sharing it. So social media, face-to-face conversations. We know that sometimes they use it on their partners at home and their teenage children, and they tell us it works for them as well. Next slide, please, Ben. So I mentioned diffusions of innovation theory, and we've worked alongside Exeter University to explore, and they've undertaken some research into that with us. And I'd like you just to hear from the key researcher on that piece of work, Siobhan. So she's just going to talk for a minute about diffusions of innovation theory.
This is a research model that describes how a new idea or a positive health behaviour spreads through a community. So this is a theory behind what our community champions have been asked to do with Pass It On. So this diffusion of innovations theory has been successfully used in lots of different settings, so community settings, school settings, to pass on health messages. So in previous research, it's been used for things like stopping smoking, safe sex messages, healthy lifestyle messages, those sorts of things. And a very similar approach is also used in breastfeeding peer support. So you have our community champions. These are our people of influence who are a real local voice in their early years community, who spread these messages to their network. And those people will then spread messages to their network and so on. And that's how this kind of diffusion theory works.
Great, thank you, Ben. So we like to think of Pass It On as a very subtle approach. We talk about it as a whisper in the ear or planting a seed. And we hear from our community champions that that's what helps it work for them, that very light touch approach. Next slide, please, Ben. So on this slide coming up now, you'll just see a model that came out of that first piece of research with Exeter University about how the receptive context for passing on evidence-based messages to parents is really important. And it's all about the building of those relationships and very much peer-to-peer relationships. Next slide, please, Ben. So this first piece of research is being published shortly in Perspectives on Public Health, and you'll see on the right of the screen, it's very small text, I know, I can send that out to you. You'll see a poster that was presented to the Behavioural Science Public Health Conference a couple of years ago. And we've had a second piece of research. So I mentioned Kath when we were looking at the photo of our champions before. So that was undertaken in 2022, and Kath attended one of our Building Babies' Brains courses. Ben, I don't know if you're able to play the link video from that just at the top in the right-hand side of the screen. I don't know if it's showing for you. No worries if it's not. No, I can see that it's not come up. Don't worry, we can send that on to people. So we stay in touch with our champions in lots of different ways, the usual social media that you expect. We send out a quarterly newsletter that has all the latest research and resources and materials that they can share. We offer a continued professional development to champions. They're invited to other workshops, so we'll share webinars like this with all of our champions. And the other way we do it is with our learning platform. It's called Fred because Thomas is our learning platform in Action for Children after the two people who set up Action for Children. Ben, could you take us on to the next slide, please? So I apologise because I know this is really busy. I wanted to try and give you a snapshot of our learning platform. So our learning platform is for peer learning in sessions 3 and 5, when everybody comes online together and uses all of the resources that are there for weeks 3 and 5. And there's a live chat forum as part of it. So we pose questions which people then share their experience and ideas of. And that's because we ask them each week to practice passing it on. We talk about them stretching their wings to grow their confidence a little bit. If you'd like to see the learning platform, I'm really happy to set up a Teams and show you how it works in operation. What it does is it gives champions free ongoing access to all of the resources. So all of the 7 weeks resources are held in Fred and they can access it anytime, anywhere. So just a couple of things I wanted to say as we come to the end of my presentation, we're continuing our research. So we've got a research fellow from Exeter University, somebody who's just starting their PhD. She's joined our most recent course in Torbay. So she's looking at that sort of community-based messaging and knowledge mobilization. And I start a pre-doctoral local authority fellowship in January. So it's always that desire to keep up to date with the latest information and see what works for champions. Any questions, please pop them in the chat, but you can also email me afterwards. And thank you, Ben, for sharing my slides for me in perfect synchrony.
You're welcome, Georgina, and thank you very much for that presentation and talk. I personally find it inspiring when we see the benefits of sort of science and research coming together and being delivered practically on the ground to make a difference for babies and their families. So thank you for the presentation and the work that you and your colleagues are doing. What I'll do is, when I put this up on YouTube, which will be hopefully ready for tomorrow morning, I'll make sure that we have a link to that slide and the video that you were able to show embedded in that description so that people can follow on straight from there and access that material, because I'm sure they'll find that very rewarding to do so. So for those of you that are watching, if you do have questions, remember, please use the Q&A function. We will move to the question and answer after we hear from our next speaker, Alex. So do get your questions in, and we'll make sure we get as many of them answered as possible. And so without further ado, Alex, I'll pass over to you to talk through your presentation.
All right, so I think that worked. Ben, can you just give me a thumbs up if you, yeah, okay, fabulous. All right, so hello everyone, I'm Alex. I'm a research fellow at the University of Oxford. And I'm mostly going to be talking in this 20-minute slot about the START programme, which stands for Supporting Toddlers with a Connection to Autism or ADHD to Develop Strong Attention regulation and thinking skills. So what I'll do is I'll kind of start with a bit of a rationale behind START. Why do we think these skills are important, and why are we targeting it at the children that we are? And then I'll outline what happens in the START sessions, talk you through who's eligible and how you might signpost families to START, and then round up with some broader opportunities to get involved with some of the other things that we're doing to support children's early development. So, I guess the key thing to understand about the START programme is at the heart of this programme is the understanding that attention, regulation and thinking skills, which we sometimes call executive functions, these are really essential building blocks for everything from language and cognitive development to our emotional regulation and our ability to form relationships. So these skills, which include inhibitory control, cognitive flexibility and working memory, begin to develop in infancy and toddlerhood. So even as early as the first year of life, children start to be able to control their own attention. And they begin in toddlerhood to be able to control some of their impulses, although, of course, all of you who work with toddlers will know that that's not without some difficulties. And they begin to be able to adapt their responses to different situations. And extensive research has shown that strong executive functions are linked to a whole range of positive life outcomes, from academic success to better mental and physical well-being. And these positive associations really begin within the first few years of life. Now, unfortunately, some groups are vulnerable to difficulties with executive functions, and this can lead to problems with independent living, mental health difficulties, and lower quality of life. And in particular, people with autism or attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, ADHD, often experience executive function difficulties. Many of you will probably know that autism and ADHD are overlapping and heritable, by which we mean autism and ADHD often co-occur within the same individual. If you're autistic, you're more likely to have ADHD and vice versa. And they also tend to cluster and run in families. So a child with an autistic first-degree relative, for example, is more likely than average to have ADHD and vice versa. And executive function difficulties are a genetically influenced link that might explain some of this overlap. And these difficulties start early. So latest research from my team shows that by age 2, children who are already showing high autistic traits tend to also show executive function difficulties. But what's really kind of interesting is that not only do individuals who are showing these autistic traits or ADHD traits not only are they likely to experience executive function difficulties, but also individuals with a family history of autism or ADHD. So an older sibling or a parent who's autistic or who has ADHD, they are also more likely to experience executive function difficulties and related problems with mental health and social and academic outcomes, even if they don't meet the diagnostic criteria for autism and ADHD themselves. In terms of the numbers of children we're talking about, well, we know that estimated prevalence rates of autism in the UK are around 1 to 2.5%, ADHD 2 to 7%. If we're talking about family history of autism or ADHD, research from my team is showing that at least 9% of children born in the UK in the last few years have a known family history of autism or ADHD, and that rises to as high as 17% if we include suspected cases of autism or ADHD. And of course, there are lots of reasons why autism or ADHD might be suspected but not yet confirmed. And it's worth noting too that rates of family history of ADHD appear to be higher in less advantaged communities. So basically, if you're working with families in any capacity to support children's early development, you are more than likely working with some families where there is a family history of autism or ADHD, and therefore there are children who are likely to experience executive function difficulties. And this is a population that doesn't fit neatly into clinical categories. So some children with a family history of autism or ADHD might shift between diagnostic criteria as they grow up. So they might first present in a more kind of autistic way and then later meet diagnostic criteria for ADHD. Others might never receive a diagnosis at all, despite struggling with these executive functions. And this is the group that then is particularly likely to fall through the gaps in current service provision. For the children who do receive a diagnosis and eventually are able to access specialist services, interventions tend to focus on things like social skills, language development and behavioural difficulties, and executive functions are key to all of these areas. So by supporting children who might be on a pathway to an autism diagnosis to develop strong executive function skills, we're aiming to reduce the need for later, more expensive or intrusive interventions. And also, really importantly, finding ways to address executive function difficulties will meet many of the priorities identified during community consultation. So there have been lots of priority setting partnership exercises led by the James Lind Alliance, which have identified the need for research into early identification, interventions and support to help people with autism or learning difficulties to achieve the best mental health, education and life outcomes. But at the moment, most early interventions in autism in particular focuses on the development of social skills or the suppression of so-called restricted and repetitive behaviours. And many autistic people, not all, but many autistic people object to this approach as kind of seeking to train children to suppress their spontaneous interests, behaviours and social communication style. In contrast, the START project focuses on supporting children's ability to pursue their own goals and cope with the day-to-day demands of life in a way that's neurodiversity affirming, by which I mean we celebrate autistic children and children with ADHD traits for who they are as individuals, and we work with their interests, skills and preferences rather than teaching them to mask their traits. And we've been able to do this thanks to the generous support of NIHR, who funded us first to refine the programme in consultation with parents who have a connection to autism or ADHD, so parents who are neurodivergent themselves or who have a neurodivergent child. And then we've been able to pilot and further refine the programme, and we're now in the process of conducting a feasibility trial, which I'll be telling you more about in a second. So this co-refinement phase was incredibly important to us, as it meant that we really felt confident that we have a programme that, yes, draws on theory and cutting-edge research into early executive function development, but it's also absolutely aligned with families' needs, experiences and priorities. So over the course of the year, we've honed everything from the underpinning logic model for START to the programme materials themselves. And it's kind of led to the point where we have 3 key components of START, which aims to support children in 3 ways. Firstly, by providing play-based opportunities to embed skill practice across contexts in ways that are appropriate to individual strengths, challenges and interests, and which are accessible and appropriate for families from diverse backgrounds. Secondly, we value what parents are already doing to support their child, and we use coaching and peer support techniques to promote parenting behaviours that are likely to be linked to strong executive functions. And then thirdly, we empower parents to consider how they can improve environmental fit for their child so that executive function stresses and excessive demands are reduced. And we do this by a 12-week parent-toddler programme. So each week, trained early years practitioners lead group discussion around a different attention regulation and thinking skill, and they share ideas for ways to help toddlers develop those skills. Every session involves hands-on games and activities for toddlers and takeaway resources and ideas for parents to adapt to suit their child and carry on playing those games at home. The programme structure is built around the idea of building blocks, where we gradually introduce key skills with an opportunity to recap or catch up on missed sessions in weeks 6 and 12. And guiding the ethos of the programme is this dual emphasis on play and peer support. So the sessions are led by trained practitioners, but the aim is for parents to feel empowered to support each other in sharing not only what they're struggling with, but also what they're already doing that works well. And we're delivering the programme in collaboration with the charity People, which via its national network of early years practitioners supports thousands of families each year to foster their child's development. So this kind of allows START to be a potentially sustainable and large-scale model in the future. But the real reason that I chose to partner with People is because the People ethos is that what families do in daily life has a huge impact on child outcomes. And that's core to the START programme, and we've seen it over and over again in research, including my own. So with People, we have already run 2 pilot rounds of the START programme in Oxford. So we've involved 13 families in total so far, most of whom have a family history of autism or ADHD. But we've also expanded that eligibility criteria to include toddlers with high autistic traits, so even if they don't have a known family history of autism or ADHD. And the results from the pilot rounds indicate that both parents and toddlers find the programme engaging, supportive and enjoyable, and practitioners are able to deliver the programme in the way intended. And we're now at the feasibility randomised controlled trial stage. So what this means is before we run an absolutely massive trial with enough families to thoroughly check that START does indeed improve toddlers' executive functions, we need to first check that our plans for how we might run that kind of a trial are sensible. So can we recruit enough families, keep them with us for each step of the evaluation? Given how young the children are, can we measure their executive functions in reliable ways? And so we're running this small-scale RCT in 2 locations, Oxford and Southampton. We've already run one round in Oxford, about to have its final session, and we're actively recruiting in both locations for families with a child born between February and October 22, who either have a parent or a sibling who's autistic or has ADHD, and we don't necessarily need a formal diagnosis there. Suspected autism or ADHD is sufficient, or a child would also be eligible if they're already showing autistic traits, and that's either been picked up by the parent themselves or maybe by a nursery key worker or a health visitor. So here's how the process for the RCT phase works. Generally what happens is that parents contact us directly. So either they've heard about START from an early years practitioner, a health visitor, GP, or they've seen an advert. We're doing lots of posting on Facebook at the moment. So they'll contact us, we'll then send them information sheets, answer any questions that they have, and ask them to complete a very short screening questionnaire to check that they would be eligible for START. If they're not, then we can signpost alternative support and resources. If they are, then we will schedule a baseline assessment for when the child is between 18 and 22 months. At this baseline assessment, we bring the child in for a range of games to look at these different aspects of attention regulation and thinking skills. And we also do some kind of standardized measures of developmental ability and autistic traits. And we can share a report on that with the parent if they want, if it's helpful for them to pursue a formal diagnosis alongside START. And generally that happens in the lab, but we can also do home visits as well, particularly for our Southampton families. We found that that's the most popular option. So after the baseline assessment, one of my colleagues contacts the family to let them know whether they've been randomised to receive START or randomised to usual practice. And it's a 50-50 chance which one they're randomised to. If they're randomised to usual practice, it's just carry on with life as usual. Nothing to do until the endpoint questionnaire. If the family is randomized to start, then the practitioner leading their group will contact them to discuss accessibility needs, their priorities for the sessions. And then when the next wave starts, so that'll either be January or April 2024, they're invited to come along to this 12-week program. So every week, same time every week at a local community setting, and the sessions last for an hour, very play-based, very fun and light and enjoyable. And after each hour-long session, we ask them to complete a very short questionnaire to let us know how they found the session. Then when the child is around 31 months, we ask the parent to complete a range of questionnaires to find out how the children are doing, followed by a more comprehensive assessment when the child is 3 years old. And that includes those attention regulation and thinking skills games again, and also another kind of diagnostic, well, a clinical workup of autism and ADHD traits and developmental ability, not with the aim of giving a diagnosis or not. That's not something that we can do within the program, but we can pass on the report to parents who can then pass it on to their health providers as well. So we recognise that is quite a lot for families. So we do everything we can to reduce the barriers to taking part in research as much as possible. So at each stage, we're offering expenses and vouchers as a token of appreciation for their time and effort. For families who do take part in START, we will cover travel expenses to every session, and we provide free resources each week to take home. And again, at the end point and follow-up questionnaires, more vouchers, and we can cover travel expenses or indeed provide a home visit. So how can you let families know about START? Well, the first way to do it is to direct them to our website, startproject.info, where they can find out more about the project and contact us via the feedback form. Or you could share our Facebook posts. We've been posting a lot in Oxford and Southampton, but we've heard that sometimes it can take up to 11 times of seeing a post for families to really recognise that this is for them and that they might want to take action. So the more people can share our posts, that would be really, really appreciated. And if it's helpful, I can absolutely send you the digital materials and digital flyers or even physical flyers to pass on directly as well. So please do get in touch with me if you think you might know any families who might be eligible for START, because we really want to make sure that we're reaching all the families that might possibly benefit from this programme. So that's it on START. Obviously, I'm very happy to take questions about this at the end. But whilst I have you, I also just wanted to quickly mention a network that we're building for anyone involved in supporting families with children under 5. So the aim of the Supporting Early Minds Research Network is to expand research in the early years sector by supporting early years practitioners and professionals. So that's everyone from health visitors, parent infant psychologists, early years teachers, family hub workers, anyone with a remit of supporting families with very young children, to really shape the future of research in the early years. The idea is that this network is going to be a virtual space for researchers, commissioners, practitioners, service providers to come together to contribute to research that aims at enhancing future practice within early years settings. And we know that many people are kind of interested in becoming more involved in research opportunities, whether that's just directing families to research or whether it's leading a research program and setting research questions. But it can be difficult to know how to go about this, where to start. So that's kind of one of the aims of this network, to really bring people together and have those conversations. So if you are interested in that, please email me or my colleague Michael Fanner, whose email's on the screen there, and we can tell you more about the network and get you involved. And then for those of you who are particularly keen on doing in-depth research yourself, I do currently have a funded opportunity for a PhD studentship, and that's in partnership with Southampton Family Hub, on the topic of identifying barriers to accessing early years services and supports. So if you think you might be interested in that, please, again, do get in touch with me. I'm really keen to hear from people who maybe wouldn't consider themselves to have a traditional academic background. Maybe you did a degree some time back, but you've built up lots of experience in the meantime in the sector, and you'd like to complement that with research. So do get in touch, but act fast, because the deadline for this one is 15th of December, so you don't have a lot of time. So I will wrap up there just to flag up my contact details again. And as I say, any questions or wanting to kind of see how our research can complement each other, please do get in touch. But I'll stop sharing at this point so that we can answer any questions.
Thank you, Alex, for that presentation. It's really great to hear about your work. I think for a lot of people, we recognise the importance of needing to have support and measures in place for babies and their families when autism and ADHD are involved. But it's probably not as well developed as we would like. I think it's sort of a fair way to put it. So thank you very much for sharing that work. Yeah, we've had a few people put in questions already, but please do, if there's something in your mind from either Alex or Georgina's presentation that has sparked a thought process, do try and get it down into a question using the Q&A function, and I'll try and get as many of those read out and give the time to have them answered as possible. There's one that came in earlier aimed towards Georgina, so I'll go with that one first. The question was specifically about if there are courses available in or around Newcastle upon Tyne, but I guess if we could broaden that out, where else in the country might the course that you've talked us through be available?
I think if people are interested, please feel free to give me an email and we can have a look at options for your area of the country. Off the top of my head, I'm sure there are Action for Children's services in Newcastle on Tyne. I think I've had conversations with people, I should know that, but we're a very big charity, so I can't remember off the top of my head. But yeah, please do get in touch with me because we can look at delivery options. So yeah, please do give me an email.
And then the next question I've got, I'll just sort of flip between you both to give you a chance to answer and a chance to have a breather. So one for you, Alex. Have you considered networking with counsellors and psychotherapists as we work with adults and children with ADHD autism?
Yes, so absolutely, I have done some, but I'm sure that I've missed lots. So if you are one of those groups, please get in touch with me. This is a very kind of niche population in terms of the age group that I'm working with. So I'm aware that a lot of counsellors and psychotherapists will be working primarily with families with older children, but often they have little siblings coming along. So it may well be of relevance to your family. So yeah, please do get in touch. It's also worth saying that during that kind of refinement program for START, I met with lots of different kind of specialists in the kind of autism and ADHD fields to see that this would chime and fit in alongside other services. So it's not about replacing any one way of working with families. It's about doing something that can start really early in a really light touch way and be complementary to other things as well.
Great, thank you. Georgina, there's one for you. I guess quite a general one. I'm assuming from as a lot of practitioners on the ground sort of see a great piece of work and then try and think about how they can piece that or something like that together in their community. So the question is, how is your program funded?
It's a mixed picture of funding. So we had funding from Devon County Council that was added value to our children's centre contract. So that's what's enabled us to do most of our work within Devon. Within the 2 family hubs that we've rolled out to, that's been funded individually by the family hubs. We've put in funding bids for pieces of work. People can buy us in independently. So there's a really kind of mixed picture of funding that's helped us to keep delivering and keep on expanding and improving the programme. Hopefully that answers your question.
Great, thank you. Alex, there's one from Tamsin Brewis asking, can she ask if addressing executive functions at an early age has the possibility to reduce autism and ADHD? Is this something that has been investigated?
Really interesting question. So potentially it does. That's not the kind of avenue that we're taking with START, we consider that both autism and ADHD, they're obviously genetically influenced, and we don't see that there is a downside to neurodiversity in the broadest sense. That, you know, autistic children and children with ADHD, they can thrive and be, you know, happy and flourishing members of society, and be autistic and have ADHD, and that's what we're hoping to achieve. And we hope that by addressing executive functions, we can support that flourishing without changing anything fundamentally about who they are. It may well be the case that if we support a child's executive functions, their behavior may change a little bit. And so it might look that autistic child might be in the world in a slightly different way. But I don't think they're likely to be less autistic, because that's not really how genetics works as we currently understand it. But, you know, these are still very, very early days. So yeah, my best answer is we hope that we're supporting autistic and ADHD children rather than taking away someone's diagnosis or making them any the less neurodivergent, if that makes sense.
Great, thanks, Alex. I've got another one for you with slightly different emphasis. So it says, Alex, it's been insightful to learn about your work. It is much needed. I wondered what policy measures you feel could be introduced by the government or local authorities to further help babies with ADHD, autism, and their families.
So I guess the thing about autism and ADHD is that when a child is 2, you can't really tease them apart. It's actually hard enough when a child is 7, 18 to tease them apart, because they are incredibly overlapping. So I guess if I could wave a magic wand, I would advise policymakers and clinicians to not worry about that in the really early years, to be thinking about, oh, could this child be neurodivergent? What supports might they need? And no, we can't give a reliable predictive diagnosis of exactly what category they fit in at age 2, because they're too young, and, you know, toddlers are all chaotic in their own fabulous ways at this age anyway. But what we can do is identify children who might benefit from early support. So if we can prioritize doing that and worry less about diagnostic criteria at age 2, that would be a wonderful step forward, I think. And yeah, I would love policymakers to be thinking more about what are the skills and aspects of flourishing that are going to be important to the child, more than, yeah, how do we take away a diagnosis? You know, how can we get people thinking about what matters to children's mental health? And I think executive functions are a real core part of that.
Great, thank you. And then there's a couple of questions that sort of are relating specifically to what you were talking about at the end about your funded research opportunity. So there was an anonymous person that has asked if you could just talk through some of the detail of that again. But there was also a specific question from Nathan linked to that, where he says his degree has a different background, but he does think that it would be useful for him to do a master's, as he has a COO role while his team starts the launch of a new PIP team. What is the eligibility to take on the funded master's?
Okay, so it sounds like both questions are about the studentship. So the studentship is being advertised as what's called in Oxford bizarrely a DPhil studentship. It means a PhD. And within that could include a master's. So if you don't already have a master's, or your master's is in a slightly different field and you think you would benefit from kind of another year of research training, then that could be wrapped into the funding. So Nathan, yes, I would absolutely encourage you to apply, and let's have a chat afterwards about, you know, whether this fits into your life vision. Just to reiterate, this is the deadline for that is 15th of December, and it would be basically working with my team and with Southampton Family Hub's team to kind of better understand who are the families that we're supporting through early years interventions, who are the families that we're not, and why is that? What barriers are they facing? What are the communication gaps? Sharing kind of opportunities to get involved in interventions, and where do families fall away and why? So that's the PhD funding opportunity. And then separately, there's this research network. And I think someone mentioned a question about funding for that as well. So if you join the research network, one of our kind of remits is helping build teams so that they can apply for funding together. So it doesn't necessarily come with a pot of money just by joining the network, but it increases your likelihood of finding other people who could search for such pots of money together so that you will get it and then be able to do the kind of research and answer the kind of questions that you want to support your local families.
Super, thanks. Yeah, we've got a few more questions for Alex. If anyone has anything that links back to Georgina's presentation, do again use the Q&A to bring that forward, and I'll make sure that we pick that up. We've got one, Alex, from Abby Mack, which is, are the START principles something that could potentially be embedded into other non-specialist parenting programs? Are there universal skills that all families could benefit from? Thinking, for example, the Henry program.
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. And probably, yes, I kind of wanted to answer it with neurodivergent families first, because I think this is a population that doesn't get well served. So I thought kind of morally, it's quite nice to start from a specific underserved group and then broaden it out, rather than start with everyone and then, adapt. So that's kind of why I've done it in the order I've done it. But I think, yes, there are definite opportunities in the future to go, okay, can we broaden START out beyond connections to autism or ADHD? A lot of children, whether they're neurodivergent or not, for example, have sensory preferences. And, one of the sessions in START, we talk about, well, how can you respect and attune to your child's sensory preferences so that they're not overwhelmed from the get-go? And then what positive behaviors and skill development will flow from that. So I think that kind of thing will be appropriate to all families. I feel like there was a second part of the question that has now flown from my head there. I guess the thing I'm thinking about is embedding START and adapting it for early childhood and education care settings. So not just being parent mediated, but also nursery setting mediated. So if anyone's excited to apply for funding to do that, then please get in touch, because I think that would be a natural next step for START as well.
Thank you. And there's another from Mosaic Cams, which is, what clinical professions are there providing the START program / workshops? Do you want to just take that one? Yeah,
so we have deliberately made this quite a light touch program. So there is no professional training requirement to become a START practitioner. All the training that you need to deliver START is within the START training. The key requirement is actually being able to show empathy to families and toddler wrangle. You're hosting parent-toddler groups, so it's about managing a space in a way that makes it inclusive and enjoyable for everyone. Some of my practitioners have had particular backgrounds in the past. There, we've had Home Start practitioners, we've had HEAP practitioners, we've currently got Family Hub workers who have been trained in other early years interventions, and all of these things can kind of sit alongside. So it's about kind of finding the principles of START and then meshing it with other knowledge and skills and expertise, because as far as I'm concerned, all early years practitioners are brilliant. I just need to give them the information that I want them to share so that they can do that alongside all the other brilliant things that they're already doing.
Thank you, Alex. We are sort of approaching the end of our sort of allotted hour, so we'll draw a line there. That there were a few comments, which for the sake of time, I will make sure that Georgina and Alex receive those from you rather than read them out. They were people expressing their thanks and support for the work that you're doing, and the fact that they were impressed with you both. So from me, I just want to say a big thank you to Georgina and Alex. It's been a really, really wonderful session. Two great approaches, quite different. Obviously, one for babies more generally, and the other more targeted at a group that really needs support. So thank you both very much. If you're watching and you have a great project or a piece of research, or you're about to launch a campaign that you think would be a great to be part of our webinar series, please do get in touch. We use these, like I say, to give our members a platform to talk about the work, and for the rest of us to be able to learn together from it. So if there is something, please email me. My email address is ben@parentinfantfoundation.org.uk. And if you're not already subscribed to our newsletter, or you're not connected with us on Twitter, please do follow us, because we will obviously be promoting similar webinars in the future, but also we'll be launching our manifesto for babies in the new year. And I'm pretty sure that's something you won't want to miss out on. So please do sign up if you haven't already. So we'll have the recording of this up for tomorrow on our YouTube page, and we'll make sure that links to sources that were referenced by Georgina or by Alex in their discussion are included in the description, so you'll be able to find all those references there. Okay, so just from me, again, thank you to Georgina and Alex. Thank you for those who've taken some time out of your day to tune in from home, for being part of our network and sharing in this learning experience and our webinar. Have a nice rest of the day, and hope to see you at our next one.
Thanks so much. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye.